Murray's in the litter box. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. That's all. If you are new here, hello! My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. This week's story is sort of continuing this theme that I've stumbled into. You know, terrifying, troubled teenagers. Say that 3 times fast. Terrifying, troubled teenagers. Terrifying, troubled teenagers.
We are the weirdos, mister.
This story involves a group of 6 terrifying, troubled teenagers. Terrifying, troubled teenagers. They lost their way and left a trail of destruction behind them. This is the story of the Lillelid murders. Also, just so you know, if you are interested in any of the makeup that I use while I'm telling the terrible story, because I don't really feature it, just look down in the description box because everything is linked just for you. On Monday, April 7th, 1997, a call came into the Greene County, Tennessee Sheriff's Dispatch. A concerned citizen reported hearing the sound of gunfire near a dead-end road right off of Interstate 81 at the Baileyton exit. Now, it wouldn't be unusual for there to be hunters in the area, but it wasn't deer season. When the sheriffs arrived to the dead-end access road, they found a beat-up old Chevy hoopty, headlights still beaming. Next to the car, in a very shallow ditch, were 4 bodies piled up on top of each other. There were 2 adults, 34-year-old Vidar Lillelid and 28-year-old Delphina Lillelid. They were a married couple, clearly deceased. Also, there were 2 young children, 6-year-old Tabitha and 2-year-old Peter. And holy shit, the kids were still alive. Now, the family hadn't suffered a car accident or some other kind of emergency. They'd been shot. So, how did they get there? We're gonna have to back it up just a little bit. So the day before, April 6th, 1997, 6 young shitheads were traveling from Pikeville, Kentucky to New Orleans, Louisiana. The group, and we will be calling them the 6. We're 6. They ranged in age from 14 to 20. Terrifying, troubled teenagers. 20, not technically a teenager, but you know, pretty much. There was 18-year-old Natasha Wallen Cornett, 19-year-old Edward Dean Mullins, 20-year-old Joseph Risner, 18-year-old Crystal Sturgill, 14-year-old Jason Bryant, and 17-year-old Karen Howell. We're gonna have to get into the background of all these kids, so hold on to your butts. So 18-year-old Natasha Wallen Cornett was born into poverty on January 26, 1979, the result of an extramarital affair. So Natasha's mother, Madonna Wallen, was not a nice lady. You know, to just be simple about it. Madonna was physically abusive to Natasha and her sister, but in her view, it was fine because she wasn't using fists, just open hand. Madonna was raising the girls mostly alone in a ramshackle trailer outside of Pikeville, Kentucky. Madonna also struggled with drug abuse. And there was an incident when she had overdosed on pills and was discovered naked and unconscious in her bed by a 5th grade Natasha. So growing up in this environment didn't really help with any of Natasha's early underlying conditions, and she later developed some mental illness, like eating disorders, bipolar disorder, and self-harm. Natasha's behavior escalated to criminal activity when she was arrested for forgery at age 14 and was given 1-year probation. On top of all of that, you know, this rough upbringing at home and this, you know, criminal behavior that she was getting herself into, Natasha was like not accepted by her peers at school. You know, she dressed weird in their view. Dark clothing, baggy, goth looking, right? They just thought she dressed weird, acted weird, listened to weird music, was just weird. Sometime during her freshman year at Betsy Lane High School, she dropped out completely. She started doing a variety of drugs, all of the drugs, LSD, cocaine, ecstasy, PCP, meth, heroin. On her 17th birthday, she married her longtime friend, Stephen Cornett. But the marriage lasted less than a year, and after Stephen left her, Natasha's behavior and mental health just took a nosedive. Now, for a brief time, Natasha actually moved to New Orleans with a friend, but it was a disaster. She suffered an assault. It was just really, really bad. So she ended up moving back home in with her mom. It was around then that she started dating a boy named Edward Dean Mullins. 19-year-old Edward Dean Mullins was born on January 26, 1978 in Harold, Kentucky, and like the rest of them, Dean attended Betsy Lane High School, but he dropped out in his senior year. He was working off and on at a grocery store, but after he began dating Natasha, he started really getting into trouble. His family didn't really like who he had become after dating Natasha, but you know, he was dickmatized. Okay, and he ended up moving in with Natasha, hoping to eventually get married. So one of the friends that was critical of this relationship between Natasha and Dean was 18-year-old Crystal Renee Sturgill. Crystal was born on March 13th, 1979, also in Harold, Kentucky. She had been an excellent student until she began high school and started using drugs. Crystal had also recently revealed that she had been sexually abused by her stepfather since age 4. After she had come forward with that abuse, she ended up moving around a lot, you know, just seeking support and protection, I guess. And she had moved to like some 13 different places. Another one of the friends was 17-year-old Karen Renee Howell. She was born on November 25th, 1979 in Delaware, Ohio. Her family later moved to Kentucky, you know, when she was about toddler age. Karen's parents divorced when she was about 9 years old, which, yes, that's traumatic, but also kind of a good thing because they would fight a lot and they would get very violent. Karen struggled with self-harm and suicidal ideations and multiple attempts. She was very rebellious. You know, she didn't like rules too much, and she was super duper into drug use, and she really, really enjoyed the occult, you know, goth stuff. She enjoyed using a Ouija board to try to connect with the spirit world. She did this thing called like involuntary writing, where you're trying to like connect with the spirits and you're just writing, I guess, whatever messages are coming through as the means of communication. Anyway, so Karen's communication with the spirits and all this, the use of the Ouija board, her mom was not about it. She thought it was like straight up demonic. Hey girl! I think she even brought in some like church people to try to like cleanse her of the spirit. Anyway, so Karen connected with Natasha at school. You know, they were birds of a goth feather and became besties. Karen's boyfriend was also a former Betsy Lane classmate, 20-year-old Joe Risner. Joseph Lance Risner was born on October 13th, 1976 in Hazard, Kentucky. Joe actually grew up in the church, but after being molested by babysitters and getting into heavy drug use, things took a negative turn for him. He had actually dated Natasha for a brief time, but then he moved on to Karen. And Joe was the oldest one in the group, having dropped out of high school, and he even joined the army until he failed a drug test and was invited to leave military service. After that, he returned to Kentucky and, I don't know, was just sort of hanging around with this group. And lastly, there's 14-year-old Jason Blake Bryant, born on July 18th, 1982 in Hellier, Kentucky. Jason began drinking alcohol at the tender age of 3.
Jesus Christ.
Who was giving this 3-year-old alcohol? He first tried marijuana with his mother at age 10. Oh, that's who. Got it. Jason was developmentally delayed, like emotional intelligence wise. He was like slow, you know, low IQ. It was actually later said that at this time, when he was 14 years old, he had the emotional intelligence of like a 10 or 11-year-old. So Jason was troubled. He was a habitual runaway and was under court supervision. And it was about a month before this crime took place that he met or crossed paths with Natasha. He was actually walking the street, you know, actively running away, and she picked him up and took him home like he was a lost puppy. So the six have a lot in common. They all came from pretty terrible upbringings. They'd all attended Betsy Lane High School, except for Jason, because he was too young. They had all suffered various degrees of abuse, most of them, pretty significant abuse. They'd all suffered trauma in their home lives, abused drugs, they got into criminal trouble, and just, generally bad vibes. Karen and Natasha would play around with witchcraft and black magic things, and they were both, self-harmers. Is that the right way to phrase that? Self-harmers? So, that spring, April of 1997, the Six decided that they needed to get the fuck out of Kentucky. Natasha's boyfriend, Joe, had a car, although it was piece of shit. And Natasha was the only one who had ever even been out of Kentucky, really. You remember she had briefly lived in New Orleans, so that was the plan. They were all gonna run off to Louisiana. So they all piled into Joe's jalopy Chevy Citation, and they knew the thing wasn't gonna make it all the way to New Orleans, so they had already started talking about stealing another car along the way. Karen had stolen $500 and a handgun from her father, and Natasha had gotten another handgun from some friend. And the Six skipped town. Before they got too far out of Kentucky, Natasha had gotten a room at the Collie Motel so that they could party. They were doing all the drugs, and the girls were burning holes in the carpet. And there's some reports that say that they were doing like witchcrafty things, and the burns on the carpet were like in the shape of 666. Speculation, okay? Sensationalism. Whatever dumb things they were doing were definitely later described to be some kind of devil-worshipping nonsense. But either way, they were causing intentional damage just to be jerks. Then these shitheads decided to skip out of the motel before they'd have to deal with this damage they caused, and they headed down south on I-81. When they were about halfway through the state of Tennessee, Karen had to pee. They took the Baileyton exit and stopped at a rest area. And this is where they met the Lillelid family. Lillelid. Difficult to say. So Vidar Lillelid was born on May 6th, 1962 in Bergen, Norway. He decided to try his luck in the United States, and he moved to sunny Miami, Florida. Vidar met a very pretty girl named Delphina. She was a first-generation Honduran American by way of New Jersey. Vidar and Delphina were both Jehovah's Witnesses. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are like an offshoot of Christianity. I'm not going to even try to pretend to understand the differences or like what they're all about, but bottom line, Vidar and Delphina were very devout, and they were very active in their congregation. They fell in love, they got married in 1989, and when they were ready to start a family, they decided that Miami, maybe not the best place to raise small children. So they decided to relocate to a quieter area of the United States, less crime, less hustle, less bustle, and they moved to East Tennessee, just outside of Knoxville. They later had 2 children. First was a girl named Tabitha, and then later a boy they named Peter. They were very humble people, simple. Vidar worked as a bellman at a hotel in Knoxville, and Delphina stayed home to raise the children. As Vidar and Delphina were getting more into field service, that's the thing where, you knock on doors and share the good news or whatever.
Hello.
On April 6th, the Lillelid family went to a religious conference being held in Johnson City. So remember, the Lillelid family didn't have a ton of money, but their congregation was very supportive. They came together and collected money to pay for gas and to buy new clothes for the family to wear, to make sure that they were prepared for this conference. So at the conclusion of the convention or conference or whatever it was, a lot of the attendees were going to gather together at a restaurant, for dinner, but the Lillelids didn't really have that kind of money, so they decided just to get going, and they were going to stop at a rest area and just maybe have a picnic dinner. So they took the Baileyton exit, and while they were there, they were engaging with other families and people they saw all fired up on God or whatever. And this is where the Lillelid family encountered the Six. The shitty shitheads were eyeing the Lillelid's family vehicle. They had like a conversion van that was quite large, and that would have been a much nicer arrangement for them than Joe's hoopty Chevy Citation. By the way, never in my life have I heard of the Chevy Citation. What is this? My family had a Chevy Celebrity, and it was also a piece of shit. So this was the perfect storm. The six were eyeing the Lillelid's van, and the Lillelid family were, very excited to engage with these very obviously wayward teenagers about their religion. And witnesses even saw the Lillelid family sitting down at a picnic table with these young shitheads. So it wasn't long before Joe Risner showed Vidar that he had a handgun, and he told him, "We're gonna need your van, and you're coming with us." Vidar offered his keys and wallet, but Joe refused, and instead he forced the family into their van, and then he ordered Vidar to drive while he sat in the passenger seat holding a gun. Jason, Karen, and Natasha also got in the van while Dean and Crystal followed behind in Joe's shit-tastic Chevy. So Joe told the family that they would be fine if they were quiet and cooperative. Nothing's gonna happen to you as long as you're quiet, nobody's gonna get hurt. The plan was to ditch the car and the Lillelid family and drive off in the van. So Joe had Vidar drive them out to a secluded gravel road that was well out of public view. So during the drive, Delphina was trying to keep the kids calm, so she was singing to them, but then Jason ordered her to stop. Once they got to where they were going and the van was stopped, Jason ordered everybody, from the Lillelid family out of the van to line up along the street next to this shallow ditch. Then Jason Bryant opened fire on them execution style. And there's a little bit of a debate about who actually fired the weapons, and there's also evidence that two of the weapons, both of them were used. But either way, Vidar was shot 6 times, Delphina was shot 8 times, Tabitha was shot once in the head, and Peter was shot twice. Once that was done, Joe's shitty Chevy was abandoned, although they did remove the license plate, and as they drove away in the Lillelid's family van, they ran over their bodies. Well, when the sound of gunshots was reported to the police, there was one person who also said that they saw 2 vehicles go down that gravel road, but only one came out. When the sheriffs arrived, they found the Lillelid family lying in this ditch, shot, and then they saw Tabitha move and Peter cried out, "The kids are alive!" The kids were rushed by helicopter to the pediatric intensive care unit at the University of Tennessee Memorial Hospital in Knoxville. Tabitha had suffered a very traumatic brain injury that pretty much caused brain death. So she passed away pretty soon after arriving to the hospital. Peter's wounds resulted in spinal damage and he ended up losing his right eye. But after spending 17 days in the hospital, he was stabilized and placed in the care of his extended family. So essentially orphaned now. There was a little bit of a battle of where Peter would go to live, like who was going to take him. So Vidar's sister, Randy, pledged to raise the child in the faith and teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses, so she was awarded custody of Peter. So when the sheriffs found the Lillelid family, they also found the abandoned Chevy Citation backed over a stump on the side of the road. Apparently it got stuck. So the license plate had been removed, but these smart children left the registration in the glove box. So the authorities were very quickly able to trace the car back to Joe's mother, who told them that she hadn't seen her son in days, but she gave the names of the 5 other people that were traveling with him. So helpful. Thanks, Mom. So now that the group were officially 6 fugitives from a triple homicide, they knew that they couldn't continue on to New Orleans anymore. So they hatched an ingenious plan to escape to Mexico instead. So less than 48 hours later, the group inside the Lillelid's family van approached the Mexico border in Douglas, Arizona. They were initially denied entry because they did not have the proper identification.
You can't sit with us!
They eventually did squeak through, but they were acting so shifty and shady that they were pretty quickly approached by the Mexican police, where they were detained. So the Mexican police searched the vehicle, and of course, it was filled with things that linked them back to the Lillelid family. Photographs, keys, car seats, toys. They also found the 2 handguns and Karen and Natasha's books about witchcraft and magic stuff. Well, the group was arrested and returned to the US, where they were immediately jailed. Despite being caught essentially red-handed, the group was initially defiant, especially Natasha. She called herself the daughter of Satan and professed to be a devil worshiper, probably to lay the grounds for an insanity plea, but that didn't work out. Well, all 6 of them were charged with the same offenses, attempted murder, first-degree murder, and kidnapping, and the DA was seeking the death penalty. The communities in Greene and Knox County, Tennessee, were outraged. Mobs of angry citizens gathered at the courthouse to yell, "Burn in hell, murderers!" One local business actually constructed a gallows in their parking lot with 6 nooses. The owner clarified that they were not advocating for lynching, but they were a staunch advocate for capital punishment. So on March 13th, 1998, all 6 of them entered plea agreements, guilty to everything in exchange for life without parole, and they would also be required to testify against each other. Now, each of the 6 told different stories. Surprise. Natasha, Karen, and Joe said that 14-year-old Jason was the shooter. Alone. Jason said that once they realized the death penalty was on the table, Natasha, Karen, and Joe colluded to come up with a story that Jason was the lone shooter because he was only 14 years old. Well, evidence shows that 2 guns were used in the shooting, so who knows what really happened. Either way, none of the 6 are going to leave prison alive. They each run consecutively, so it's impossible to ever even reach eligibility. Well, after Peter was orphaned, he went to live with family in Sweden. He made an incredible recovery. He uses a prosthetic eye. He's got a little bit of a limp, but otherwise, he's all grown up now and living life with his wife and young child in Connecticut, and he works in the IT field. And that, friends, is the story of the Lillelid murders. Anyways, if you want to know what makeup I used, look down in the description box. Everything is linked. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, also down in the description box is the link to a Google document where you can fill in all of the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Due to his age, Peter's motherfucker. Does that look nuts? That is really orange. There's hairs all over my face. Critical. Hold please, Natasha. I said doo-doo. Nope, that's not everybody. Oh my god, I just drank an energy drink and it's making me like itch. Get it together. Get it together. Everything itches. Oh my god. Oh, you guys, it's a rare treat. Look who it is. It's little Debbie. Hi. Please don't bite me. Deborah. Hold on, girl. Hold on, you're fine.